tradition, in the Theravadan tradition, of asking if there was a senior monk present, more senior than me, just for permission to Dhamma talk. Thank you, Bhante. And I'm just going to pay homage to the Buddha, and then I'm going to chant a little verse for you in the dead language. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Puttasa lokadhammas citam yasana kampati asokam virajam kemam etam mangalam uttamam ti. So this verse is from the Mangala Sutta, and it means to have a mind that, when touched by the troubles of the world, remains calm and sorrowless, untrembling. So this is the Buddha's advice on us how to live well. You know, don't get too bothered by the world and the stuff that happens. And it's a pretty high standard, I have to say, and it's pretty easy living in a busy world with lots of things going on, with our strong sense of self, having to live with humans, to allow the vicissitudes of life, the ups and downs, to get the better of us. And our job as Buddhists is to learn, to see, to develop perceptions that are going to help us understand the true nature of our reality, the true nature of the suffering that we experience. And so the Buddha's job was to give us some advice, give us some direction, and the direction I'm taking from him today is the lokadhammas. So these are the worldly conditions, the 8 worldly conditions. And he said that these things make the world go around and go around the world. So the world is spinning because of these 8 lokadhammas, and these 8 lokadhammas also spin around the world. So what are these things? There are 4 pairs. There's gain and loss. So these things that we get and these things that we don't get or that we lose. I'll talk more about each of them in detail in a little bit. And then we have ill repute, so like a bad reputation and fame. And then we have blame and praise. And then we have pleasure and pain. So these 4 pairs of worldly phenomena are what shape our world and what help the world to turn. Do you want me to go through the list again quickly? Gains, loss, ill repute, fame, praise, blame, pleasure, pain. So these things, we cannot avoid them. They're the experience we have of the world. I just came in, I was quite excited today, I got to catch a train, and I haven't caught a train for a long time. And on the train ride, I was able to experience all of these worldly phenomena in a 1-hour train ride. There was someone tried to give me money, and I was like, gain, but I don't accept money, so I lost it. There was a woman behind me the whole time complaining about someone in her office, and she was giving this woman a bad reputation, and she was blaming her and praising herself. So anyway, on the train ride here, I kind of remembered, you know, this is pretty intense, this life that we live. these phenomena really do shape our existence, and they cause us to have a very strong sense of self. The Buddha said, you cannot escape them. These things are going to happen to you. Even the Buddha could not escape these things. But he said that there's a difference between the way a mere worldling like us, someone who is just trying on the path of Dharma to get some wisdom. There's a difference between the way someone like us might understand these things and the way someone who has some attainment, an Arya Savaka, someone who has seen the truth, has developed some insight into the true nature of reality. There's a difference between the way that someone like us sees these 8 worldly phenomena and a difference in the way that those people might see it. So what is the difference? And he says the difference is just basically in their view, the way they view things, which is pretty good because you don't have to become super magic to change your view. And even in the meditation that we just did, we started to develop different perceptions. And this is all that we need to do. So what happens to an ordinary worldling like us when we experience gain or loss or praise or blame? The problem is we don't see it as it truly is. So we think that these things are permanent. We have some gain in our life, we get a new car and we are excited. We think it's permanent. This is my forever car. This is the best car ever. And then we think, this is pleasure. Yes. And we don't think that it's going to change. So this is how we kind of view the world. And the Buddha says we are wrong in our view, because the truth is these things are impermanent, they are suffering, and they are changeable. So the Buddha uses these words anicca for impermanent, and dukkha for suffering, and the changeable thing is the viparinama. And because we don't see things correctly, because we have this wrong view, we become infatuated. We become obsessed. And because we become obsessed, we end up being repulsed by things that we don't like and attracted to the things that we do like. Do you want to turn the aircon off? I'm fine with it off. Yeah. It's the heat element. It feels much cooler in here now. And so the problem for us is that because we become obsessed and we become excited, we end up suffering because we're attracted to the things that we think will give us pleasure, but in fact they give us pain, and then they change, and then we're repulsed by them. So there's kind of like this spectrum of extremes in our life that we can travel along. But the Buddha says the difference between us, who experience things in this way, and the Arya Savakas who experience the same things, is just the view. So instead of being confused about if it's impermanent, they know from experience that these things are impermanent. They know that they're suffering, and they know that they will change. They're changeable. Because they have the correct view, they do not get obsessed, they do not get infatuated. And because they're not infatuated with these things, they don't run towards the things they think will give them pleasure, they don't run away from the things that they think are painful. Instead, they are just accepting, knowing the true nature of reality. Because of that, they don't suffer. So the Buddha says the problem for us mere worldlings is that because of our wrong view, we end up suffering. And we're not freed from suffering by having this view. The only way that we're going to free ourselves from suffering is by understanding the true nature of our experience and that is freedom from suffering. So, that's why I did the 4-element meditation with you before, because it's not that dissimilar to the way we have to perceive these things that appear in our minds. Our attachment to material objects, our attachment to praise, our belief that these things are permanent, that they're going to make us happy. This is what causes a great deal of problem in our life. And so we need to cultivate a perspective. Monica and I were just chatting before about the different uses of meditation, and she was saying, oh, I usually like to do just this pretty simple breath meditation, and it's just easy. And I said, that's true, it is actually really good to have a practice that you develop that is, you don't have to think too much about it. But meditation is also an art, and it's something we have different tools for in our life. So if you only have a hammer, everything has to be a nail. But we need to develop different tools to work on different problems that we have. So to become calm is really good, to become peaceful is really good. But we can also develop tools that help us develop insight into the nature of reality. And in the same way, when we contemplate these 8 lokadhammas, we develop insight into the cause of our suffering. And by understanding the way they work, we can develop equanimity. So we can start to develop a detachment towards these things, in the same way that we develop a detachment to the body, so that eventually we can be okay about letting it go when we die. So these things are useful, not just because it helps us internally, but it means that it will give us an understanding that helps us deal with the world, because the world is always coming to us through these 8 worldly winds. So I thought we'd go through each of these pairs, and I'll talk a little bit about them and how we can use this understanding to help us when these things come up in our life. So the first one I thought we'd look at is pleasure and pain, because these two are pretty fundamental in our life. They actually control our lives. You know, I complain about the heat, someone puts the aircon on, I'm like, yes, cool at last. And then we get too cold, and then we want the air conditioning off. So this is the constant movement that we have from pleasure to pain, pleasure to pain, pleasure to pain. In the Bhumija Sutta, the Sariputta says that pleasure and pain are dependently originated. So that means they arise together, dependent on each other. And you can see this from that example I just gave. You know, the pain that we experience is only because we have this idea of pleasure. We only experience pleasure because it's an absence of pain. And so, because of this, these things have to be dealt with as a pair. You can't just say, well, I'm only going to experience pleasure from now on. It doesn't work like that. And you can't only experience pain. You'll end up enjoying your pain, maybe. These things are dependent on each other. A good sutta that helps us understand this is the Mahāli Sutta, where the Buddha said that if in these 5 khandhas, do you know what the 5 khandhas are? It's just the things that the aggregates, we call them, or the heaps sometimes, form, feeling, perception, sankharas, or volitions, and consciousness. So these things are what we mistake for our body, mind, experience. So it's like in the same way before, when we looked at the body, we were mistaking our body for these elements. You know, we think, okay, I've got a body, but it's actually falling apart. You know, these elements are changing the whole time. Same with the aggregates. We call them the pancha upadana khandhas, the 5 clinging aggregates. And we mistake them for our sense of self. We mistake them for our experience of the world. And the Buddha said that if these things were inherently pleasurable or inherently painful, we wouldn't have a problem. It's because these things are both pleasurable and painful that we have a problem. So with feeling, for example, we've got 3 types of feeling: pleasurable feeling, neutral feeling, and painful feeling. But because these things are constantly mixed, it means that we've got something to compare it to. So if things were inherently painful, it would be really easy to abandon our interest in something. It would be really easy, if it was inherently painful, to abandon our interest in the body. But because there's a little bit of pleasure there, we keep coming back to it time and time again. But the good thing is, because there is pain, it means that the pleasure isn't constant either. We don't have 100% pleasure. This little bit of pain, this little bit of suffering, is what we use to start to abandon our attachment to the 5 khandhas, to the body, to this experience of suffering that we have in samsara. So this is the mixed nature of our suffering. And it's like this for all of the other lokadhammas. They're all mixed in terms of suffering. Pleasure, pain, praise, blame. These things are actually on a spectrum. They kind of interact with each other. Pain, suffering, needs to be understood fully, the Buddha said. In the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta said we need to understand the true nature of our suffering. And the Buddha was pretty particular when he talked about suffering. He actually gave a definition of what suffering is. Suffering is being born, suffering is aging, dying, suffering is all the sorrow, lamentation, pain, physical pain, mental anguish. Suffering is being coming into contact with things that we don't like, and not coming into contact with things that we like, and suffering is not getting what you want. So this is a pretty exhaustive list of things that come under the term dukkha, pain. So it's both physical pain and also mental pain. And pain is such an important factor in our lives. It's what we run away from constantly. We're always looking to escape our pain. And this is what causes us to run towards pleasure. But what kind of pleasures do we run towards? So usually the kind of pleasure that we run towards is sense pleasures. And you're in the world, you've had a hard day at work, painful day at work. So what do you want to do? Just want a little bit of pleasure, just give me a little bit of joy. And so this is how we live in the world. The Buddha also talked a lot about the problem we have with sense pleasures. He gave a whole, have you ever read the Pattaliya Sutta? Some of you would have seen that. It's a list of pretty extreme images of sense desire. The first one is a dog eating a bone that's been well cleaned by the butcher. So there's only the tiniest amount of blood on that bone, and you give it to a dog, it gets the flavour, the taste of meat, but will never be satisfied with that bone. Keep chewing on it, its hunger will never be satiated. So this is what sense pleasures are like for us. You get a little taste, but you never, ever, ever get full. You always want more. For some reason I'm thinking about my sister, who I call the centipede. She has over 100 pairs of shoes. How many pairs of shoes do you need? Centipede. Yeah, centipede number 2. So we can see that our sense desire is unquenchable. And the second image the Buddha uses is birds of prey. So you have like a crow maybe picks up a little bit of meat and flies away with it, but then an eagle comes and the eagle wants the meat too, and so of course the crow has to let it go, you know, before they fight, and he gets hurt. And so the Buddha used this to show that our sense desires are actually a competitive thing. We're all competing for the ability to enjoy our lives, and everyone else around us wants the same things that we want. That's why the house prices in Sydney are so expensive, especially at the beach. Everyone wants to live at the beach.
Yeah.
So this competition is what kind of controls our experience of sense pleasures. So that's something the Buddha thought he should let us know about. The third one he talked about is a person carrying a grass torch, a burning grass torch, and it's a windy day, and so the flames and the torch flies into you and kind of you catch on fire. And who hasn't been burnt by their sense pleasures? You know, what teenager hasn't drunken a little bit too much? Or who hasn't had too much chocolate and had a tummy ache? So our sense pleasures actually, if we indulge them too much, they'll burn us. And you start to see it as you get older. Actually, people are burnt out by their sense pleasures, you know. Another image he used was a glowing pit of embers, like a fire pit, and a man being dragged there and held over it, and this man having to wriggle and try to get away. So this image kind of goes against our idea of what sense pleasure is. You know, he's saying this is kind of torture. You torture yourself. And when you think about the way we try to entertain ourselves with sense pleasures, it is all consuming. You know, we wriggle away. We've got to get up and do our sense pleasures, whether it's listening to music or gardening or whatever. It consumes our mind. It's like this kind of torture that we experience. We're always agitated towards it. So it's a problem. He also said that these sense pleasures are like borrowed goods. So there's a kind of debt. And he says, you know, what person would take these borrowed goods from people and walk around the town? You know, he's got these people's jewellery and clothes and ties or whatever. And of course people are going to say, can I have that back? You know? And so it's like we have to repay this debt when we have sense pleasure. And the hangover, I guess, is a perfect image for that. And even just the enjoyment, you know, we have to pay to enjoy to go on a roller coaster. You know, there's a debt there, you know. You then have to replace that money. So this is what happens with sense pleasures. And the last one is quite an interesting image. It's the image of a tree full of fruit. And this tree has such delicious fruit. There's a man who wants to come and have some of that fruit. So he knows how to climb a tree. He gets up the tree. He takes as many fruits as he likes. And then he's so full of fruit, he kind of just relaxes and falls asleep. This image is kind of like the sense pleasures are the fruit, and us being hungry for some fruit, climb a tree and we indulge, and then we kind of become unmindful because there's someone else coming along below with an axe who doesn't know how to climb that tree but thinks, I'm going to get that fruit, and cuts down the tree. And so the person who's up the tree is in trouble, and we're all kind of up the tree, enjoying our sense pleasures, enjoying the fruit, but you know, it could change at any moment. So these are some images that the Buddha used to talk about sense pleasures, because when it comes to the lokadhammas, this is where we tend to put our trust. We put our trust in sense pleasures. We think that these sense pleasures are going to relieve us of our pain. but of course they're not a safe refuge for us. They are impermanent, they are suffering because of that change, and because they change, they are also suffering. So there's one of my favourite suttas called the Bodhinyana Sutta, and probably I might get a bit emotional because the last week I've been thinking about this one a lot. I keep on bursting into tears because of the gratitude I have towards the Buddha. So the Buddha says in this sutta, I know it's so tragic, I hope I don't do it here. Sometimes, when you meditate a lot or when you get gratitude come up, it's very overwhelming, and especially towards the Buddha and his teaching. Without it, where would I be? In this sutta, the Bodhinyana Sutta, he talks about, he's having a chat with some of the monks, and he's talking about pleasure. And he says, well, most of the pleasures that you think you get are these 5 sense pleasures, and you think that this is happiness, but he says there is a pleasure far greater than that, much more refined, much more sublime, and that pleasure is the pleasure of the first jhana, which is a very deep meditative state, and where the senses don't exist. You're only dealing with the mind. The body is gone, and so all of these senses that you usually use to experience pleasure vanished. And that means that you're enjoying this pleasure beyond the senses. And he says, this is the pleasure much more refined, much more sublime than what you've been doing. It's kind of like a value, kind of, And then he says, but even that pleasure, there's one that's more sublime and more refined. Second jhana, third jhana, fourth jhana. He goes up all the different meditative absorption states and then says, but there's even a pleasure towards the end of this list, which is neither feeling nor perception. And one of the monks says, well, how can neither feeling nor perception be pleasurable? And the Buddha says, it is in the cessation of these things that there is pleasure. And so this is quite beautiful and a little bit overwhelming when you think about your own life. Here's the Buddha talking about these incredible states and pointing out the deep bliss that is attainable in this world. And here are we just on Facebook. Or indulging in very coarse activities. And so you people coming here, very refined. Very, very good, because you understand that there is something other than the experience of the world that we usually encounter. And the reason why I get teary is because if I only had experienced that sensory pleasure, I would not have gotten to experience any of the beautiful meditation states that are available. And so it's very powerful to know that there is something other than what we usually put our trust in. And so when it comes to pleasure and pain in our lives, there's a much broader spectrum than perhaps what we're aware of. And the Buddha says that we should overcome our sensual pleasure and understand pain, understand suffering. And in this way, by seeing it in accordance with reality, we can become detached. And by becoming detached, we can start to lessen the suffering that we have. And by doing that, we're actually working in line with the Buddha's teaching on gradually renouncing these things that cause us pain and suffering, turning away from them, and becoming equanimous with ourselves and our lives. So those Aryasavakas, those noble beings who have seen the truths, they don't run towards pleasure, they don't run away from pain. They accept what comes. So it's a pretty important challenge. And then the next pair is gains and loss. So gains are something we, in this culture, at this time, are pretty obsessed about. We are given full license to want whatever we want to want. Ajahn Brahm says this is the freedom of choice. You know, we have this freedom of choice, but we don't have the freedom from choice, which is this kind of renunciation of sense pleasures. And this materiality, this kind of desire for more and more stuff, it would be okay, perhaps, maybe, if it made you happy, but it doesn't. And you can try to accumulate as many things as you want, but it doesn't help. It doesn't help. There's the Ratapala Sutta, where the Buddha is talking to a Venerable Ratapala. Yeah, I think it's a king who's talking with Venerable Ratapala. And the question is raised by the king, you know, why did you decide to become a monk? You're young and, you know, you haven't had any loss in your life. And this monk says, gives a list of things, and he says, well, firstly, in this world, everything is swept away. And the king's like, what do you mean by that? And he's like, everything is swept away. And the king's like, how? How is everything swept away? And he says, well, you were a young man once, weren't you? Did you used to ride an elephant? Oh yes, I was the best elephant rider in the world. And now, do you ride an elephant? No, my legs are bad, I can't even walk straight. Everything is washed away, you know. This youth is just swept away and cannot remain. Nothing remains. Eventually, the king will be swept away by life. And he says, well, okay, why else did you become a monk? And Venerable Ratapala says, well, there is no safety or protector in the world. He said, well, what do you mean there's no safety or protector? You know, I'm a king, I've got a castle, I'm fine. I'm the king, I protect the people. And Venerable says, well, when you get sick, can you share your sickness, your pain with other people? No, you can't do that. Well, you have no safety, you know, no one to protect you. You have this pain and suffering in your world. And he's like, oh, okay, all right. And so it goes on like this, and I'll run out of time if I do too many of them. But the point is that there's nothing that can remain in this world. When we die, all of our gains, all of the things that we own, they have to go. We can't take them with us. Our body, our friends, our family, all of it gone. And I was reminded of this today actually, because at the Buddhist library where I'm staying there was a deceased estate that was brought in. So a deceased estate's when someone dies and their stuff is put together in a big pile. And I used to work in a bookshop many years ago, second-hand bookshop, so we used to get a lot of deceased estates, all their books. These people over the course of their life collect books. We collect things, yeah? We collect all these things and we're so proud of them. I know people who arrange their books by colour, they arrange their books by author, but in the end it's not going to matter. But one day in particular I remember seeing this deceased estate come in, and it was a woman, and I learned a lot about her life. She went through a spiritual phase, she had a lot of cookbooks, health books, and then the newer books were books on cancer, and then the newest books were on dying and grief. And when I got these books, this whole collection, this life of work that she had put together, hundreds of books, my job was to separate them into categories, this beautiful collection, and disperse it throughout the bookshop. And all that collecting didn't mean anything in the end. This collection was fractured, gone. It's the same with us, you know. You don't know what you've got in your house. It could be dog figurines or CDs, whatever it is you've got is going to go. And these gains that you have, why do you become obsessed by these things? Why do you become infatuated? Why do you want more and more these things in your life? Why do you chase them? Why do you spend so much time thinking about them? The Buddha said that these gains are an impediment, a bitter, rough barrier to escaping the bondage of suffering. It's pretty heavy kind of stuff, you know. And he was talking to monks. These monks, you know, even for me as a monk, I have so little. But then people give me stuff all the time. Someone found out that I like tea. And so word gets around. And then the next thing you know, people are giving you tea left, right and centre. It's very generous, it's very kind. And I'm not saying I don't respect the alms that I'm given. But what can you do with 1,000 kilograms of tea? And for a little while there, I was kind of, I have to keep them safe and protect them. I'll drink them eventually. But there's, I think maybe I was a little bit proud. I have all this tea. It was just harking back to my lay life where I was able to pile up this stuff, you know, my tea centre. The Buddha said that a monk like this is like a dung beetle, piling up. Am I allowed to swear at the Metta Centre?
Yeah, go for it. This is going to be on YouTube though. We'll bleep it out.
PG rated. Piling up all its poo that it finds. Yeah, I know I could have gone, I could have said another word, couldn't I? But that's what it looks like, sitting on top of this pile of poo, boasting. And that's what we're like, you know, we've got all of this stuff and we think we're so good to have it. We're proud, we show people our figurines, we show people our record collection, come and see my library, you know. So this is a problem because we actually start to identify that stuff with ourselves, and actually that stuff is not us, and it will never be us. We were never it, and we won't be when we pass away. The problem for us though is that we are hooked. Another image the Buddha uses is the image of a turtle, and the turtle is told, don't go over there, don't swim in that part of the ocean, there's trouble there. And the turtle, thinking whatever, goes there anyway, and unbeknown to it, gets harpooned through its shell, but he doesn't know. And so he swims away, and his family say, did you go over there? No. And then he's like, okay, I did, but I'm not injured. But he doesn't know that he is injured, and he's got this hook in him. And this hook is like, the Buddha compared it to the cord of sensuality that we have towards the things that we own. We are attached to them. They are a burden to us. So when you have to move house, it's heavy. You know, there's a woman I know just recently, she has to move and she's completely overwhelmed by it. Even me as a monk, you know, I've got this bag, this is all I bring with me, my bag and my bowl, and I'm kind of like, oh, it's so heavy. and yet, you know, the stuff that, you know, we have in our lives, that is really heavy, and people don't move house because they can't be bothered moving their stuff, you know. These things have started to own them rather than us owning those things. We don't really own them anyway. And so these material things, these are a bit of a burden for us, and they are an impediment. Wanting them is like a jackal type of animal, a jackal with mange, the disease on its skin. Wherever it goes, it can find no pleasure, because wherever it goes, it's taking its mangy, scratchy skin with it. And that's what we're like. We'll never have any pleasure in our life while we're still attracted to this itching for more and more things. So it's easy to be attached to gains, and it's easy to be repelled by the idea of losing them. And that's what happens when we start to think about this idea of loss. We start to get a little bit anxious, you know. We just get this new phone. This happened to me once, actually. I just got a new phone, brand new phone, and I lost it that very day. I lost it. I was so upset. I didn't even have time to become attached to it. I didn't have any bonding time with it, but I lost it. You know, I didn't have it one moment. I had it for a second and I lost it and I was upset. Why? You know, we have this idea that these things are permanent, that when we have something in our life, it's going to be forever. And it might seem like it is forever when we look at our houses, like it's still there, but these things even now are changing, even now are breaking, decaying. And this is what the suffering is in those objects. They change, you know. So this word viparinama, it actually means to change, to turn around, you know. And these things that we have, they decay. They become not new. They just get older. And this is what causes our suffering. But the suffering that comes from losing these material objects is nothing compared to the suffering that we get from our minds when we feel like we're losing something. And Buddha said there's 5 different types of loss. So one is the loss of relatives. So this is the grief that we have when we lose people in our life. We think that they're going to be here forever. They can't, you know. They're of the nature to die. They're not permanent, but we see them as permanent, don't we? You know, we can't imagine life without our mother, can't imagine life without our father, and then they die. And we need to acknowledge that this is a loss, and this loss is natural, you know. So you can lose our relatives. We have a loss of wealth, so we lose money. My father, he wanted to retire really early, and so he had all of his money in this superannuation account. Yep, and so it was just going up and up and up and up and up, these gains, you know. Never thought that it could go down, 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 down. And when the GFC happened, all the value of his shares just plummeted. And so he lost this wealth and he was so upset. And I was like, well, you weren't upset when the money was going up. It's only when the money's going down that you get upset, you know. So what is the attitude we have, you know, to these? This is what the Buddha said, we're attracted to loss, attracted to gains and repulsed by loss because we can't stand it. And the way we kind of pervert our mind, you know, the gains are permanent, but the losses are impermanent. Both of them are impermanent, you know. So we can lose wealth. We can lose health. And this is probably something, as you get older, you start to realise the ageing process takes away our vital faculties. We can't do the things that we used to do. Our body is tiring, it's getting old, and it's breaking down, it's falling apart. But even, let's put aside ageing, at any moment you can get sick. I know someone recently who became a paraplegic. You know, healthy one day, father of children, and the next day, you know, can't do anything anymore. So, health, you know, it's not permanent, it changes, and it's suffering, you know. And so that's 3 ways. The 4th way that we can lose is we can lose our virtue, our ethical conduct. And this is something I'm thinking of particularly with politics, with Hollywood celebrities, whose conduct, if they're not skillful, deteriorates. You probably know people in your own lives like this. They start out being good people, but over time they become unethical in their life, maybe because of the job they're doing or people they're hanging out with, and their good virtue declines. And with that decline, they lose their perfect conduct, their good conduct. So that's another way. And the last one the Buddha mentions in this particular list is views. We can lose our views. And so maybe this is a good thing if we overcome wrong view and we attain right view. It's good to lose wrong view, it's good to gain right view. But if we, having heard the Dharma, seen the Dharma, understand this concept of wrong view, and later we abandon that, then we're going to suffer because we're not seeing in line with reality. If we lose this precious opportunity that right view has afforded us, seeing things in accordance with reality, then we're going to suffer. We're not going to have a good result. If we engage in those unwholesome actions because we can't see properly the result of those actions, then we're going to have unwholesome results. So the Buddha said that those first three, relatives, wealth, health, those first three things are not going to affect us in terms of our rebirth or in terms of our future selves. But those last two, the ethics and the views, if we don't be careful and if we lose those, then there's going to be a bad result for us in this life and in the future. So when we come to think about loss, these are the kind of losses that are important for us. Losing your phone, losing your car keys, whatever it is that we're obsessed about losing, this isn't such a big deal in the big picture. And so the next two are, let's see, praise and blame. These point towards our sense of self, really. So, and again, we've got this idea that the praise is permanent, maybe, and pleasurable, but the blame is unpleasurable and hopefully doesn't last too long. And I was thinking about this just recently because we grow up being praised, and how difficult it is for us to not be praised. My twin sister has a little girl. She has been recently toilet trained, and so every time she goes to the toilet, she gets praised. Good girl, well done, very good. I tried it out. I announced that I'd achieved something, and I didn't get any praise whatsoever. So imagine though, growing up being praised, being praised, being praised. For a child you're praised for doing so many things, but then you do the same things as an adult, nothing. It's the absence of praise that makes us suffer. In your work environment, if you don't feel like you're getting enough praise, you're unhappy. If you do a good job and you don't get praised, you're super unhappy because of our attachment to this idea of ourself as being praiseworthy. And if we put our refuge in praise and we don't get it, that's why we suffer. So when it comes to the praise, Buddha said, there is no one in this world who has had has been wholly praised and who has not been wholly blamed. So we have these two things, blame and praise go together, No one is free from blame. No one is free from the praise. And even the Buddha himself constantly got blamed. People used to yell at him, you shaveling, you destroyer of marriages, of families. And when he copped this blame, didn't get angry, didn't try to shake it off, didn't yell at these people or didn't cry. He just accepted that this is the perception that other people have of him. And if we are totally concerned about other people's perceptions, whether they blame us, whether they praise us, then we're going to suffer because we cannot control those perceptions. Even Adolf Hitler, who did many bad things, had friends and was praised by people. So when it comes to our own lives, we still need to take responsibility for our actions. It's not like we can just say, I am beyond praise, I am beyond blame when you get arrested for doing a certain thing. No, Your Honour, I am beyond blame. It doesn't work like that. The Buddha did say that we should praise what is praiseworthy and to not praise that which is unpraiseworthy. And this is the whole of the Buddha's path, essentially. Do wholesome things, don't do unwholesome things. Wholesome things, wholesome results. Unwholesome things, unwholesome results. He praised the things that would go to help us. And when it comes to us thinking about the kind of praise that we want, are we really satisfied with praise for having a nice hairdo? Are we really satisfied with praise for having a nice car? Like, what is it that you want to be praised for? The Buddha said we should praise people who have ethical conduct, who have knowledge, and who we can observe for a long time and see that they have this good behaviour in them. These are the kind of people that we should praise. But remember that even those people got blame. So that's what it means to have these worldly winds of praise and blame. They come at us. And it's our attitude towards them that makes us suffer or not suffer. And the last pair is ill repute and fame. So, and actually the words in Pali is yoso and ayoso,
Yes.
yonso and ayonso, I think. Who's correcting me?
Yasa, ayasa. It's yasa.
Yasa.
Yasa, ayasa.
Okay, obviously my Pali, not as she's blaming my Pali. And my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that it means having followers. So if it's kind of just like Twitter, isn't it? So if you have followers, then you're popular, you're famous. If you don't have followers, you've got ill repute, you're not worthy of following. And so this kind of like fame and infamy, maybe you might also think of it. And again, I'm thinking about reputation, especially because of all these Hollywood exposés of people who've engaged in bad conduct. So these Hollywood celebrities who had perfect career, glittering career, star, money, and they do these actions that, when people find out about them, completely ruin their reputation. So reputation is impermanent, it is fickle, it is easily damaged. And even in the Buddha's time, you know, there was people who had bad reputations, people who were known as bad people, like Angulimala. Do you know the story of Angulimala? Who was a murderer. And it's not surprising that he had a bad reputation. He used to wear the fingers of his victims around his neck. So he had a bit of a bad reputation, and people knew it. So whenever they encountered him, even when he became a monk, they would throw things at him and curse him. And you know, his bad reputation was something that followed him. So it's very hard, if our reputation gets damaged, to repair it. And so this is one motivation, perhaps, to perform good actions and to not get carried away with unethical conduct and things like that, because it's very difficult to have a good reputation, and once you've got it, it's very easy to lose, because reputations are impermanent, they're changeable, and this is why we suffer if someone dispraises us or someone gives us a bad reputation. This is why we suffer, because we're attached to that idea of ourself. Our reputation is something that we don't hold, but is held by other people around us. And in some ways we have very little control over that, except if we do good, you know. Maybe it's true, sometimes we do good and people give us a bad reputation anyway, but perhaps, you know, this is why it's called a worldly wind. You know, you end up getting praised and blamed, you end up getting good reputation, a bad reputation, and it's all beyond your control. So even if you do really good things, if people think you're a bad person, then what are you going to do about it? And even our own reputations, when we think about who we are to other people, these are constantly changing as well. And even, I'm just thinking about the extreme reversals that people's reputations can have, like even someone like Ned Kelly, who's like an Australian bushranger, he was the bad person at the time, and then suddenly he became a hero later on. I mean, it's bizarre. So who knows what is going to happen to your reputation? The worldly wind of these lokadhammas can carry it and change it so much. But perhaps the Buddha is a good model for us in that he had a very good reputation, and that reputation still exists today. And when we praise the Buddha, when we do the itipiso, we're talking about the good qualities that he had. And that's probably the best kind of reputation that we can hope for, is to be praised and well known for having good qualities. And this is the kind of person the Buddha said should be praised, and the kind of person who deserves a good reputation. And even now, today, 2,500 years later, the Buddha still has this reputation, so he had some pretty good qualities to have that. So these 8 worldly winds, these things, if we let them, will carry our lives away in various directions. If we're not careful in the way that we perceive them, we can get caught up in them. We get infatuated, we get obsessed. And if we don't see these things clearly as impermanent, as suffering, as changeable, then we run towards the things we think will give us pleasure, we run away from the things we think will cause us pain, and in doing this we cause so much suffering in our life. The cycle of suffering, the only way to escape it, the Buddha said, is to change our view of these things. And by changing our views, we don't become obsessed, we don't become infatuated, and we don't need to seek out those things or run away from things anymore. And by doing that, we are actively reducing our suffering, and the only thing that is left when there is no suffering is happiness. So I offer this talk to you tonight on lokadhammas, and I hope that it may be of benefit to some of you. Are there any questions?
So the Buddha said that Venerable Akāliko. So you often ask me to permission you sit here. As a monk, I have intention. It means good intention. I think you giving the Dhamma, I thought you are Buddha. Like in the point of my view, I don't thinking you are my junior monk or like this. You're talking about the Dhamma. That's why. So that's why you can sit in the Dhamma asana. We call the Dhamma seat. Yes, doesn't matter. So today you have a very good discussion about the 4 elements. So just I would like to. It is very difficult to ask question in English. Just I think I'm talking about the 4 elements. But we have a very big problem in the modern monk community. About the Bhikkhu Sangha, like.
Yep.
Yeah. So you're talking about like 4 elements. If you know, male and female, both are 4 elements. If all monks, they are really they means they know about that.
All the monks?
Yeah.
Do they know that they are 4 elements, or do they know this meditation?
No, 4 elements.
Do they know that they're 4 elements?
Yeah.
Well, I hope so, because if they do, then they're following the Buddha's path and they've read some of the Buddha's teachings. So this meditation on 4 elements comes up in the Satipatthānas, which are...
Yeah, I know about that. I talk about the modern situation, like about the Bhikkhuni Sangha.
Oh yeah, they're all 4 elements.
Yeah, if we know about that, which we don't have a lot of problem. I don't know here any Thai lady or no. There any Thai lady?
Are they
even
also,
yeah.
You're also
Thai
4
people,
elements.
yes, especially Thai people, they don't want to give like this, you know. You need to put like this something. Even they want to give something like they do like this. So I want to say, only I saw the Thai people are there. It means Thai people, only Thai monks, they do like this. If I want to know that, really know about the 4 elements?
I don't know. I guess I have to ask them. But
yeah.
my impression is that we, if we were to see like this, just see everyone as, you know, these arising and falling of these 4 elements, then our perceptions of the true nature of reality would be easy. You know, it would be like, okay, fine, okay, it's just this stuff arising and passing away, arising and passing away. It doesn't matter if it's male, it doesn't matter if female, it's all mixed, it's all whatever, blah, blah, blah. But because it's quite difficult to see in that way, because we have all these other perceptions that are built by our cultural experience, education, all of these things, then we suffer because we can't get past those perceptions to see the true nature of reality. So that's, I don't know, you have to, I reckon, ask them. But at the same time, like, there's a danger for me in talking today, because I could, if someone gives me a bit of praise, I could get puffed up. If someone gives me blame, I might get upset. So even having done that meditation on the 4 elements, even having done this talk, it takes a long time to change the pattern of the way our mind works. And so if culturally people see women as taboo for monks to have contact with, or things like that, then that is also going to take a long time to get over, because people's perceptions are so entrenched out of habit. So that's why we need people like you kind of questioning those.
Not just I have a lot of confusion about that. Like we saw the 4 noble truths, you know, then we became a monks, even 4 elements, and we became a monks. So while we became a monks, so how can we again thinking about the Putujjana, you know?
Yeah.
We are like became away from the Putujjana. This is talking about the ladies, men, women. This is talking about the Putujjana.
Yeah.
Who are coming to practice the viraga, you know.
Yeah.
This is talking about the raga. I don't know in English, it's a Pali.
Passion.
Passion, yeah. So in the raga people, that they can talk about that. This is the woman, this is the man, you know. So viraga people cannot talk like this.
But we're Putujjanas until we are stream entries. So stream entry is pretty high along the path. And so, yeah, I guess we just have to have compassion for people's views until maybe they might change. I don't know. Yeah. Another question?
I have a question, because, you know, like, you talk, and it makes a lot of sense, you know, like I can see that, and I can see, but that doesn't stop me getting, you know, I'm quite excited when it's good, and wanting more of it, so I can see, you know, I don't need much stuff, so I can see that, but, you know, other stuff that plays in the head is much, much harder to go, okay, I'm just attached to, you know, being praised, that's lovely, it makes me feel good. And why wouldn't I go out and get more of that? Now, I get the sort of slightly addictive nature of all of that and get all that. What I'm not having in my head, even, let alone in any kind of practice, access to what's the alternative? Because what I have in my head, and I hear what you say, you know, beyond suffering there's happiness. And I go, yeah, well, what does that look like? You know, like, where would that come from? because, and I hear you
Yeah.
say there's meditation, there's
Yeah.
the space, but for me that's not at all, very, very vague and so
Yeah.
nebulous. And I'm going, well, in the absence of that, I'm just going to get, I don't know, a car, a tennis, but you know, whatever equivalent that is.
So I think the first thing is our intention. So the right intention that we need to have is to develop some renunciation. And the renunciation actually hits the sense desire.
Yeah.
So the more you renounce, the more you're battling or letting go of the senses. Battling's probably harsh. So that means that when we, as monks and nuns, practice renunciation, we're practicing a big renunciation. But that doesn't mean that as a layperson you can't practice a small renunciation. So it even means when you go to meditate or when you come here, you're voluntarily relinquishing some sense pleasure. And what that means is that by doing that, we can create a new space to experience the cessation of that desire. And it's that cessation which allows us to have the peace and the happiness. And it's the same with not wanting to have an attachment towards praise or... But it's not a trick. It's not a trick. It's a knowledge. It's a strategy. It's a way of seeing. And the way you actually develop the qualities that I'm talking about, like the peace, the equanimity, the detachment, is through meditation. So you can do it in through a peaceful meditation where you're very calm and very gentle with yourself, and then you see these things come up in the mind, and when they come up in the mind, you see them for what they really are. Oh, I'm really attached to these things. These are the hindrances, the thoughts that obsess our mind in meditation are the problems that we've got to work on. And if you look at them, they're often similar to the lokadhammas, you know. Oh, I want this. Oh, he said that to me. I'm going to get him. I'm going to give him a bad reputation. I'm going to tell everyone. So you see these things in the mind when you're meant to be meditating. But I think the key is to understand, as the Buddha talked about with this sutta, the nature of those things. And that's why I did the meditation earlier, which tells us to look at the true nature of the body. We mistake this body for being permanent and ourselves, and we also mistake these lokadhammas for being permanent and ourselves. And so there's that kind of insight method that might allow you to hit it a few times, and then when you develop that faculty, you actually can have a huge impact on your mind, because you see in accordance with reality, and when you see in accordance with reality, something changes, and once you've seen something clearly, you can never unsee it, and that's what propels you on the spiritual path. Yeah. It's 9 o'clock, so I'll stick around for a few minutes if anyone else has any other questions, but if otherwise, do you usually pay respects to the Buddha before you go? Okay, so we pay respects to the Buddha. Would you like to lead that campaign?
Yes. Oh, you can.
No, please.
Yes. Please, you can.
Araham Samma Sambuddho Bhagavan Buddham Bhagavantam Abhivademi Swagato Bhagavata Namo Dhanasami Supatipano Bhagavato Sāvaka-sangho Sangham Namami. Good.